Welcome into the Graham and Mac Lane podcast, presented by Ingles, the official supermarket of Graham and Mac Lane. And welcome back to our summer guest series. Mac and I live in the South. It is summer here. Now, it actually has been pretty nice, but for some people, maybe our dear friends up in Boston or Pittsburgh or whatever, they're thinking summer. Like, what are we doing? But the summer guest series is in full swing, Mac, and we're very excited about today's guest. It's funny. When you and I were just kind of chopping it up with the illustrious Roy Philpott before we started recording, we mentioned to him what we had brewing with our 500th episode that involves some sort of partnership with Ingles. And we mentioned there may be a gift card involved. And he said, y'all, I could do so much damage with X amount of money at Ingles. I mean, it's true. Like Ingles, low prices love the savings. They keep their prices low. They have great quality stuff. If you had a certain amount of gift card there for a tailgate, you could just make things happen, Eric Macklin.
There's no question about that. And I have to kind of peel back the curtain here a little bit for you guys. So I'm going on a golf trip here very soon. And our plan is to go to Ingles, load up all the coolers and take it with us. So we're not spending any money when we get down there because that's just what we do. That's how we make it happen. And also, some people have been inquiring. They've been like, hey, EMAC, why we haven't seen any stuff on the grill. We haven't seen this or that. Well, two things. A, I've been traveling way more than I anticipated with work and other things, but also we're moving. So you're going to see some new backgrounds, some new stuff, and the grilling content will come. Give me till about June, and then we'll really start ramping it up. So it's funny, KG, I had some people reaching out about that. Just wanted to clear the air. Everything's
Is Mac okay?
Yeah, it's all good. I'm fine. I'm excited. But I'm very excited for this 500 episode coming up. It's been a wild ride. It's been a fun ride. We can't thank y'all enough for tuning in, commenting, being a part of this journey. When we go to other schools and I hear people tell me, man, we watch y'all's podcasts all the time, that really is cool. And it means a ton to me. So we appreciate y'all so much. We'll get into more of that next episode. Right now, it is all about Roy. He's the best. KG, you just said before we hit record on this, he could do a 3-hour show in his sleep. We could have made this a 5-hour podcast, but he had stuff to do. We got things to do. It was a real treat talking to Roy Philpott. You guys are going to love this. Quickly, a message from our friends over at Ingles, and then let's talk with Roy.
Did you know that Ingles sells more organics than any other store? Or that they run their own dairy? Or that they only serve USDA choice and prime meat? Did you know that they have more local craft beer than any place else? Or that they have Energy Smart stores? Or that they professionally slice and package imported cheese from Europe? Did you know about their giant international aisle, local farm partnerships, curbside pickup, wine department? Or that they donate 3,956 meals a day to local food banks? Well, now you do. It's all in the bag. Ingles, low prices, love the savings.
The illustrious Roy Philpott is joining us here on a sun-splashed day in South Carolina. It's actually not. It looks kind of dark outside.
I have clouds and thunderstorms always. So good for you guys.
It looks a little dark. But Roy, oh my gosh, we're just so excited to have you on. I think I really would have to look back, and maybe I will for the intro, but I think we had you on maybe in 2022. It has been a minute. So welcome back to the show. We are so excited to have you. How are things going?
Things are well. I appreciate the invitation from you guys. Congrats on all the success. It's incredible to watch two former Clemson athletes and graduates have this level of success. And I wasn't an athlete at Clemson, but I obviously went there and even graduated in computer engineering. You feel like you're part of the broadcasting family out of Clemson, which is not known for that, but maybe in short order it will be, right? I mean, we got a couple of folks out there, including the three of us, and a lot more, honestly. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, it's good to be with you guys. I appreciate it.
It is certainly fun, and there's a little bit of pride, a little bit of excitement every time I see any of our Tigers out and about on the broadcast or in the broadcast booth or on the court or sideline or anything. It is really cool to see because that wasn't the case like 10 years ago at all. And, kind of speaking of that number, brother, I think you just celebrated your 10 years at ESPN.
Maybe a little more. A little more
than that.
Well, let's see. Now, so yes, I've been calling games for more than a decade. My first game was in 2013.
Yeah.
But I went full-time January 6, 2016.
Okay.
So
Gotcha.
I view the record like that way. So, it's one thing to do games, but when you're full-time, you feel like, okay, man, it's not that you arrive, you never arrive. It's like you're kind of a part of the deal, you're part of something. So, yeah, I've been doing it for more than a decade, but full-time it'll be 10 years next January 1st.
Wow.
And that's a win, man. If you last this long, hopefully you don't suck too bad.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. What's the key? Because KG and I, we're creeping up there, but we're not at double digits yet. So, what's kind of your biggest key, man, of just longevity in a company that has been very well documented, the turnover that has faced, and some people that do it on their own accord, but others that get removed and things of that nature. So, to you, what is the key to sticking around?
Yeah, I think being low maintenance, you would start there. I mean, everybody wants to be the next big name, whether that's in play-by-play or as an analyst. But for the most part, you don't get a free pass, and you don't jump through a wormhole to go from an entry-level position as an announcer to a food chain. So everything takes time. So I think being low maintenance, understand that, having some patience. And maybe most importantly, though, is be willing to adapt and be willing to accept criticism, know how to get better. That's not something that any of us are comfortable doing. Like, you don't like to hear critical work or critical words about your work per se.
It's actually my favorite thing. I mean, I just kind of listen to it on repeat over and over again.
Well, hey, I mean, look, on some parts of social media, that's out there, and you can find it 24/7. So you got to be careful with that. But I think you also understand you have to learn how to grow in the position. It's not a situation where you just advance to the top right away and be low maintenance and all those things and work to get better. I mean, you don't get better by just being stagnant and continually doing the same thing. And so, I do look at it as trying not necessarily to reinvent yourself from year to year, but maybe find some areas where, okay, this is an element I want to get better at. On the camera, walk and talk, bigger calls, bigger moments, better research, whatever it is. I think we can all examine things, no matter what the walk of life is, what your occupation is. Okay, I get better here, and that will lead to overall development, career enhancement by just stacking up good seasons, good years, being low maintenance, high energy, all those things that you guys would expect.
Roy, this takes me back because just to peel back the curtain, Roy and I, of course, worked at, for people who might not know, worked at 105.5 The Roar and Clemson together for quite a few years. And Roy was one of the first people I called when ESPN contacted me. And that's the kind of advice I got from Roy. And it's stuck with me. And because, Mac, like to your point, Roy was doing it before us and he was able to solidify himself, but also kind of differentiate himself. In the play-by-play world, it's a whole different ballgame. Like it's even harder for sure. So let's just walk back in memory lane here for a second, Roy. I started as an intern with our guy, the illustrious Zach Orr. Let's shout him out. Tell me just what you remember about the Roar days. Like, what are some thoughts that come to mind? I remember when your head was shaved in the parking lot. That was great. Give me some other things that stand out.
Yeah, I mean, the storytelling, the moments where you saw coaches or players live out, just their dreams. I remember when Clemson won a national championship in 2016 and doing the show right after that, doing shows where streaks and rivalries came to an end or started, the emotions of the fans. I mean, football season's there. You just show up, you take calls, you give one or two takes, and you're on to the next game the next week. And it's, kind of wash, rinse, repeat. Doing the shows in the middle of the off season when things were a little bit slower and you get into deeper storytelling. Like I remember those. I remember the callers that always had fun takes. Those were fun. The people we work with. You mentioned Zach Orr, working with you, working with Ben Milstead, upper management, everybody, the whole cast of characters. There's not a day that goes by where I typically don't hear from somebody that used to listen to the old show. And it's just fun, man. Nothing but great memories involving all that. And I tell young broadcasters, like, a really good way to perfect your craft, to get better, to rocket ahead in that department at least, is to be able to host a sports talk radio show.
Yeah.
A weekday, daily sports talk show for more than 2 hours. And look, if you can do that for multiple years and not just bore people to death, bore people to tears, then maybe you can do some things. And that has helped me more than anything, I think, as a broadcaster. On game day, in games, calling games, is having the sports talk background because, I feel like anything can happen. I can talk about it. I can fill dead space. I can back off when I don't need to be able to talk a ton. And it all really stems from those days at 105.5 The Roar. So, those were fun moments for sure.
Come on.
And we interviewed EMAC back in the day.
A lot.
I told EMAC, I was like, dude, you're going to be on this side of the table at one point in time, you're going to be asking me questions. And the
Here
last
we
time I
are.
was on this, I
Here we
remember
are.
saying that. And here we are doing it again.
And I love that. And I was very grateful for those times. And you were an integral piece of me being here because it was just reps and it was training and it was practice. And, it was fair questions, good questions. And I never will forget those Tuesdays up in the West End Zone, talking to the media and doing my, local spot
And
there
Mac,
with you
none
guys.
of us will ever forget your beard from those days because I truly wondered if you got stuff lost in there, like truly.
Yeah.
Well, it was nice because I could hide. I wouldn't get it lost. Like it was just like a pocket. I have no pockets. You just hide it in there, and you'll be good. You'll be fine. But Roy, I do want to dive a little bit more on what you said there about the Roar and how well that has prepared you. Because to me, it really feels like that for you and Kelly was almost like grad school, right? It was a living MBA. It was a living, graduate degree that got you and helped you get to, where you are now with ESPN. So what is it about that, those reps, those, I don't want to be disrespectful, but comparatively lack of resources and still having to do the same, if not more. How was all of that prepared you for where you are now in detail?
Yeah, it's trying to be compelling maybe when, not every day of the year there is compelling content to talk about and to overanalyze. And it's perfecting the craft of storytelling. Not that I perfected it, but you'd like to think that, you're comfortable in front of a camera talking about players and teams because, you did that on radio for the 5 or 6 years that I had my show there. Like, in my opinion, you really can't get better at broadcasting unless you are broadcasting. Like, you can't practice broadcasting in your room, in your dorm room, in your living room, in your driveway. Like, you literally have to be there in the heat of the moment and get those live reps. So, like, if you call minor league baseball and you call 100 games in the summer, like, that's a fast track to getting a ton of reps. Now, you're not going to make a ton of money doing it, but in terms of understanding broadcasting 101 and, what it takes to call baseball games at least, that's kind of a big deal. So doing a sports talk radio show every weekday, 3 hours a day, it's like pressing the fast forward button because you're going to encounter all kinds of things. You're going to encounter technical issues. You're going to encounter funky phone calls. You're going to encounter weird stories. People asking you questions on the fly that you don't know the answer to. A whole bunch of like real world scenarios that could all happen in the span of like 2 or 3 shows. And just through the course of that, like you just learn how to adapt and learn how to interpret and talk on the fly, maybe without having a ton of research done on whatever topic that particular caller wants to ask you about. So, like being able to go through those scenarios and those reps hundreds of times in a given year, and then being able to host shows for multiple years, 5 or 6 years, in a market where people care and people listen, and there's ratings. And you get evaluated all the time on social media. Like it all shapes and impacts you really in a positive way. And it doesn't matter if the feedback out there is positive or negative. If people are talking about it, the chances are you're doing something right. You just have to be able to interpret and decipher some of the bad with the good to figure out what really matters and how to allow it to help you the most. But yeah, those reps, dudes, you guys know it's about getting reps. The more reps you get, the better you become. And I don't think there's a fast track. Like you can't. There's very few people that just show up and here is this enormously successful podcast, or you're an enormously successful play-by-play person or analyst. No, man, you kind of got to grow up and understand the business and learn how to find your voice and be authentic. Especially when it matters the most.
It's the best training out there, and I'll give Roy credit too, because Roy was definitely. For people who listened back then, I did a show with Quack and we were just the kids. I mean, we were just there. But Roy was such a good example because he was such a professional, but he still had fun. It's like he gave Quack and I the leeway to have fun and do a whole show on when Quack had bats in his attic. Like those are things that you do in June, So yeah. I know I've told you this, Roy, but it was just a great breeding ground overall that you helped Quack and I so much. And I know it helped you a lot as well. Like you said, it's the best training.
Yeah. And look, it's sports. It should be fun. Like if you are in our business and this isn't fun for you, you're in the wrong business because there's a million other people that are going to work harder and have better energy and prepare harder because they think it's fun compared to what you're going to do. So, I mean, that's kind of the litmus test. Like even the games, like the games I call can be serious, and many of them are, but you still hope that you have fun,
Right.
And that there's a moment of levity that you can kind of capitalize on. I think that all the time for sure.
Yeah.
Completely agree.
It's a fun thing, man. And I think what you say about, the sport and what you do and loving it, listen, we're making money doing this, right? Like we're working, it's a job, but it's also a crazy grind. KG and I always kind of joke with each other about, landing in Bristol at 2 a.m. Nobody hears about that. They don't hear about you driving to the airport, getting there at 3, having a production meeting at 8. Like you don't hear those things. That's not fun, right? And that's a part of this. And the technology you said, they don't know that you might be calling the biggest game of your life and your headset's not working. And you're calling the game blind. Like nobody knows those things. And so if you don't truly love it, this thing will burn you out. It will tear you up and it'll say next up if you don't love the sport, if you don't care about it and things of that nature. And that kind of leads me where I wanted to go next. This sport is changing a lot. And we've seen a lot of people begin to step away or look at a different light. Coaches move on, go to the next level, just stop in general. Where are you with college football, with where it is right now, and just kind of your thoughts on the sport? Because it's very different from when you were covering it, I was playing it, and where it is today.
Yeah, it is different. I mean, I'm in the camp of, the players helped generate all this revenue for all of these years. And I truly believe, we were long overdue for a system overhaul. And I know a lot of former players, and EMAC, I'm sure you do too. And I would classify you in one of those categories, and KG both of you, honestly, that you guys help generate revenue for schools and conferences and the NCAA, and you're in a large pool of student athletes that never got the chance to really fully utilize and be able to deal with NIL. And so that part's unfortunate. I don't like that for any of you. And there's many that are worse off as a result compared to the two of you. So, the system did need to be overhauled. It kind of went from 0 to 190 in about 2.5 seconds. And so now here we are in the Wild Wild West. And look, this coming year, we're going to have rosters in the Power 2 in particular that are built on the strength of $40 to $50 million in college football. And then we're going to have other rosters also in the Power 2 that are probably not even half that are probably 40% of that, because we don't have guardrails and we don't have a system in place that, provides proper government, for lack of a better word, governing of everything that's happening. So I like the changes. The speed is uncomfortable, and I think most people in collegiate athletics would tell you that. I'm hoping by the end of this decade that we have a system and a set of guardrails in place that put everybody more on a level playing field. Now, how deep that level playing field is, I'm not sure. It probably goes 50 or 60 teams deep in college football, spanning various conferences. So we're still in this uncomfortable position of really not understanding truly what the future is going to be. But the overall change, look, this thing was overdue. I mean, this thing started generating more revenue than anybody possibly could have thought in the 80s or 90s or even in the early 2000s. And then once it became a multi-billion-dollar business, listen, the money's too big to ignore, to think it's all just going to go to the NCAA, or it's all just going to go to the coaches or to the schools or the leagues. No. I mean, you got to think about the backs that were built, that helped build this whole infrastructure. It turns out we got to share the wealth, and so we're still adjusting on the fly to all of those principles.
Yeah, and it's so fascinating to me, the way you lay that out there. If there's no more ADs, we can still play football. If there's no more presidents, we can still play football.
Don't tell Graham.
If there's no more coaches, we can still play football. But when those players disappear, it's over. And so it's funny for every sport, but the revenue producing most in particularly, that the product was so controlled and essentially for free. I mean, I get the scholarship and I value education a ton. I totally get that. But like you said, when it became a multi-billion-dollar thing, it's like, hold on a second. Let's figure this out. And as you alluded to, KG, the 190%, we got a long way to go. We're not very close to this thing being the perfect model yet.
Well, and the fact that we whoever was in charge, waited so long to make any changes, that's when it just kind of snapped back.
Yeah.
And then it was every change you can possibly imagine. Roy, something you said there stands out to me here because this is an ACC football podcast, of course, and you said the power two. Now,
yeah, what's up with that? We're about to kick your ass off the show.
Let's be real. No one's going to argue with that. We all get it, especially when you look at it from the money being spent. I mean, I was reading the other day, Texas's roster this year is going to cost $50 million. I mean, it's right. Crazy. And there really aren't
What's
teams
the stipulation when they lose in the first round?
I know.
Is everybody fired? Like, go ahead. Sorry.
It's a great question, Mac. But, there obviously we're going to talk a lot of Clemson as we get deeper in this pod. And there's a lot of people listening who care about Clemson. It's a different offseason for us. Last offseason for Mac and I, everybody we asked was, is Florida State going to leave? Is Clemson going to leave? And it feels like they're at least going to stay for the next, 5-6 years. Where do you see the ACC right now in the college football world? And what can it do to help itself, if anything?
Well, you need the brands to be the brands. And, a 2-win Florida State team last year hurt the brand. I mean, I've talked
understatement of the year.
Sirius XM this week. I mean, that was a big deal. It hurt the brand. Miami not being able to finish strong hurt the brand. Now, look, here's some weird thing. Commissioner Phillips, you guys know he bops around to a lot of games. He was at our game at Virginia when SMU won in Charlottesville to clinch a spot in the ACC championship game near the end of November last year. And so he popped up into our broadcast booth, and I said, look, we were just talking about the state of the state and the ACC. And I said, Jim, people aren't talking enough about how you got SMU into the league. And I was like, you got them in at a bargain price. And here they are with all of these resources. And they potentially could be a playoff team for you this year. Whereas some of the other brands have kind of failed to live up to their potential billing. And he was like, you know what? You're right. Not enough people are talking about it. I was like, well, we're going to talk about it today in this game, and especially if SMU wins, about how big of a deal this is. And so to answer your question, there are some teams out there like SMU, like Georgia Tech. I mean, I'm not sure what North Carolina is going to be right now, but they got a brand name as a head coach. And I think this fall, North Carolina is last year's Colorado. There's people who are going to want to watch the Tar Heels no matter what happens, good or bad, because there's just a lot happening there in Chapel Hill with Bill Belichick. So there are some things in the works with some teams on the come up, I would say. Tech and SMU stand out. Clemson and what it could be this year stands out. Miami, you're waiting for them to turn the corner. And look, there are other teams out there, but the brands need to get better. And when I say power two, I base that off of revenue and the money that's coming in right now, the SEC and Big Ten. It surpasses that of the ACC and the Big 12. How does that shift? You got to win games, and then when you get to the playoff, you got to win those games. And so for Clemson and SMU last year, there were a lot of eyeballs in those games. I didn't think SMU maybe did so very well at Penn State. Many teams would. Clemson was very competitive in Texas, and now that's set the table for what could be this year. And it's important for the SEC that Clemson kind of lives up to the billing, right, to increase brand awareness and to enhance the perception. But we used to say back on my show, 105.5, The Roar, that perception is reality. I mean, heck, guys, that was in 2016. What do you think it is now? I mean, it's really built on the perception and the narratives that are out there. So to shift the focus and what everybody's talking about the ACC, you got to go out there and win games. And you got to get Clemson back in the Final Four, if you will. You got to get another team from the ACC that gets in the college football playoff and wins the game. And then, you know what, guys, there's got to be a third team that's knocking on the door in November. Who could that be this year? Could it be Miami? Could it be Georgia Tech and Haynes King and the great job Brent Key has done? Florida State going to be back in that mix, in the next year or two. So, look, it's about winning games and winning games that rate well, that people have eyeballs on. And it's not easy to do. I mean, it's not easy to do. But there are some surprise contenders, I think, that could do that. SMU was one last year. Could another team kind of join that mix this year? It needs to. And if you want the league to kind of be where it can go, and it can still go there, you got time between now and the end of the decade. I think that's the mistake all of us make in the media. Well, this is how it is now, so this is how it's always going to be. And even Dabo Swinney himself has talked about the idea of a super league. That may happen,
Sure.
Or you could get SEC, Big Ten, and either the ACC or Big 12, one of those two leagues that have a seat at the table for Power 3. If you grow, if you compete, if you win, that is still possible the rest of this decade. Now, after that, TV contracts are up 2030, 2031. I don't know, but you've got time between now and then to get that bigger seat at the table, provided you win some games.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, it's all about performance. You have to win. You have to be competitive. You have to win those games. And when you have the cross-town rivals, when you have the cross-conference matchups, when you have early in the season, you have those opportunities. You have to win them. And I feel like that's where the downfall has really happened. And quite frankly, it's also a consistency thing where Clemson has been bar none the top for the past decade and some change. But the number 2 team has been a revolving door, and it's there. There's no mainstay. There's no one team that, yep, they're there. They're fighting for it. And actually they're beating them time to time and winning that type of thing. So that's the biggest thing to me is who can step up and be that, who can consistently recruit at a high enough level in the portal, in high school, have the resources. Why not SMU? You know, why not everything that they have there? I think it could certainly be laid out. But if there were 1 or 2 other teams, you kind of were dancing around it a little bit. If you could say if these 3 teams or 4 teams, including Clemson, could step up, who would that be to you, Roy?
Well, so outside of it, Florida State comes front center. All right. I mean, Florida State has to get back to what it has been under Bobby Bowden, what it was for a minute under Jimbo Fisher. They won the title in 2013. What it has been in a couple of seasons with Mike Norvell, but back to a 10-win campaign for Florida State. Like that's a given. That's everybody knows that. Clemson, Florida State, right there. Miami, right there. And then you look at that next tier of team. SMU, Louisville's a team I haven't mentioned yet. I mean, they have a brand. They have the ability to recruit. Like there have been quarterbacks and coaches there, and we saw that last year. Like they've made some strides. Georgia Tech is another team. I'm not sure what North Carolina is, but they're on everybody's radar. And their opening weekend when they play TCU on a Monday night, like the whole college football universe is going to be focused in on Bill Belichick and Chapel Hill. Like that's another team. Can they kind of get there? And then I don't know what's happening in Virginia Tech right now. They've got some major questions to answer this year. And there's like a handful of teams that are kind of in that Virginia Tech category. NC State's always good, but not great. We love Dave Dorn. We love his grumpiness. I mean, it's just a perfect fit in Riley. You know, can they find a 10-win season and be a part of the playoff mix? So there's a lot of teams in that second and third tier that they've been there and done that. Can they do it consistently, to use your word, EMAC? But to me, Clemson, Florida State, no-brainers. Miami, no-brainer. Georgia Tech, Louisville, SMU, they're in that second tier to where I feel like they care enough about it, or they are resourced well enough to where they can enter the chat, stay in the chat, and be a part of a playoff conversation in November.
Join the chat, please. You mentioned resourced, and that's kind of the one word. I loved what you were saying about the next 5 years. That's the one word I would add. Not only does the ACC need to win, but you need to see, I think there are some programs that if you don't invest in the next 5 years, you might be out. Like that's just kind of how it might go. And you see teams like SMU investing. You see teams like Clemson really investing. I mean, we've all heard the questions and the concerns about Clemson and its ability to invest monetarily. And it's done that. It's stepped up to the plate. So let's talk about the Tigers, Roy. I'm just going to pose the question to you this way in a general way. If you happened to moonlight as a 105.5 The Roar host this summer, what kind of shows will we be doing? Are we talking Natty or Bust? Like, where are we if in just the dog days of July when we're dreaming on The Roar?
Well, some of that got started this week, and
when Ian Shefflin joined the squad.
That's correct.
That's what really got it going. Yeah.
I think it did. And then I would tell you guys, too, even before that, and this kind of struck me as a surprise. Some of the mock drafts that trickled out on ESPN, there was one, and I don't remember if it was Jordan Reed or if it was somebody else, but they went through a first-round mock. And there were 4 Clemson players in, like, the top 20-ish.
That'd be Jordan Reed. Shout out Jordan Reed.
Yeah, I want to say he had Klubnik like number one, and then he had T.J. Parker. And you start looking at that, and you're just like, wait a second, okay, I don't remember this when Trevor Lawrence was playing quarterback.
Sure.
Like, there was some years where, all right, 2 or 3 guys could go in the top 20. And, like, there's a legitimate conversation about 4 players next year in 2026 of going to the first round. Okay, by default, you're in the championship mix. Like, you're there, especially when you've got a quarterback that could go number one overall. So, yeah, in the middle of the summer, it doesn't take much for me to try to overhype something, right? I mean, we'll overcook the ham for a second. It is Tom Allen is the new defensive play caller. And this guy's bringing the Brent Venables energy back on that side of the ball. It is T.J. Parker reminding us of what Cleveland Farrell was all about. It is the return of the aggressive nature on defense from Clemson at the linebacker position and Ben Boulware a part of this thing. And it's all of a sudden you can throw and catch the football again with consistency and big play threats everywhere. And then I haven't gotten to Gideon Davidson. Like, I mean, if I was doing a show in the middle of summer, you people would be thinking he's ready to win the Heisman Trophy in a year or two, right, at running back. So, I mean, I think about that sometimes. Like, what would you be talking about on that stage right now? Those would be some of the things. And then it would be the countdown clock, all right? It would be what we're talking about with Clemson and LSU, because it hurts to say that that's not the marquee game of week one. The marquee game is Texas, Ohio State. That's 1A. This is 1B. It's right there. But those two teams were both playoff teams last year. And you know what Ohio State did. So that was kind of a thing. But, like, the countdown to that game and the importance of it. I mean, it's important from a brand perspective. It's important in terms of the naming rights of who is the real Death Valley.
Come on.
Who's the better quarterback between Garrett Nussmeier and Cade Klubnik? You know, Brian Kelly hasn't won one of these games in week one. He's lost to Florida State twice, and he's lost to USC in week one. He really wants to win this game, but he's on the road. And Brian Kelly hadn't won a lot of games in Clemson's Death Valley. Think back to what happened when Notre Dame came to town and the look of what it was like to walk out on that rain-soaked field that one night. So those would be the things.
Yeah.
I don't think it's national championship or bust because it's a 12-team playoff.
Yeah.
You can have a great year. I think you can have a legendary year, even at a school like Clemson, without winning a national championship. When you have to go through 4 rounds of just incredible teams, and look, you hope you get a bye, and that helps you out a little bit. But man, then you got to go beat Georgia, and then you got to beat Ohio State after that, and then you got one more. Right. So, to me, you get to the playoffs and you're in the semis. That's kind of the litmus test for me. Right now, before preseason camp, before we start getting to August, like I look at it, and if you're saying national championship or bust, there was one team last year to me that should have said it. It was Ohio State. I think Ryan Day would tell you that right now. I don't think that's where Clemson is. I think you get to the playoff, you win a game or two, and then you're a stone's throw from a national championship or a national championship game. That's a hell of a year. I mean, that would be progress and a step forward and all those things. You're saying it's national championship or bust?
Well, I think the interesting piece about that, I think, which I actually just talked myself into it while you were kind of talking there, Roy, that it could be because what's next? Cade's gone. Some of these receivers gone. Defenders gone. And so I think it would truly be that if we were in Texas's situation where we are allegedly spending $30-40 million, because then there's the investment too. But there is that what is after. And is this the year? If there's a year, this is the year. The stars are aligning. The 4 first rounders you just mentioned, and are there less? Are there more? So it is close, but I know that given the circumstance, given the climate, it is crazy to think that or to say that. But because of that, maybe it is.
I look, and that's probably me being around coaches too often because I see the weight of expectations and the toll that it takes.
Oh, yeah. And
you have to have some perspective. Listen, I understand you're the diehard fan. You give all the money to IPTE. You do all these things. And I understand that you would say, all right, it's national championship or bust. Otherwise, what am I doing? What are we doing? And part of me understands that. But in terms of being real, right, and being realistic, they made it to the playoff last year. That was a win. You had a road game at Texas. That was a loss. But overall, this season was a win. And it builds the foundation for this run coming up this year. Win a game or two, it's progress. You know, you're probably not going to win a national championship or be in that conversation every single year, right?
Sure.
It's not 2016 anymore.
Hard,
I don't know that you have a lot of super teams.
Right.
So that's my perspective on it. A successful run next year, if you're a Clemson fan, to me, get to the playoff, you win a game or two.
Yeah.
And then, man, you hope that you're healthy and the Canes good enough. You're certainly in the mix. You're in the fold. So, look, if we had this conversation a year ago, you'd be dying to be where you are right now.
Yeah.
No question.
A little perspective is needed on some of that if you're talking national championship plus.
Yeah, I'm right there with you and totally agree. I think the speaking of last year and this exact moment, I think about this all the time. We didn't know where Cade Klubnik was going to be. We didn't know how he was going to play. We didn't know what he was going to look like. And he totally dominated and just got rid of any type of preconceived notions or thoughts, and he blew up. And he did a lot of that. We heard from Barrett Carter, we've heard from his coach, obviously Dabo Swinney, and we've heard from him about what he put into it. What was the biggest difference to you? Is there a couple of things, play-wise, leadership-wise, growth-wise, whatever, that you were like, yep, that right there is different than what I've seen the previous two?
I'm going to rule out the Georgia game. I'm just going off of memory here.
Yeah, that was domination in a different sense.
That was the staff's fault. That was their fault.
Well, that's more, Roy, when you bring up last year, like what my mind goes to is, for me, because I was at the game, so you were back too, driving home from Atlanta. Like, to think that we'd be having this conversation now, you thought the program was over at that point.
Yeah.
I would agree, and it wasn't. And obviously the emergence of Brian Wesco and the receivers made a big difference. Put the Georgia game on the shelf for a second.
Right.
First half, it kind of looked the part. Second half, obviously, it didn't. But you asked me, when did I kind of have a sense that Cade was different and the offense was different under Garrett Riley in year two? I think it was the next game against Appalachian State. Mm-hmm. And one of the first plays from scrimmage, there was a downfield pass, and either went to Wesco or
it was Wesco. It was first play of the game.
Yes. And that play didn't exist. That play wasn't there previous week, obviously, or the previous season for the most part. Mm-hmm. Right then, and you saw the reaction of Klubnik. I mean, he's running down the field, pumping his fist, doing all these different things. You knew that it was going to be different and that things felt different. And some of the talk in preseason was going to be validated. And, of course, it was. So, to me, the downfield passing game and what happened there throughout the course of the season, that showed how different things were and how much more ready the offense was ready, I guess, that makes sense, to take the next step. And then the consistency of it, it was there. I think behind the scenes, the big story at the end of the year and some of the losses that occurred late was Bill Moffitt not being healthy and shoulders, the other injuries that were there, and that hurt Clemson late. But otherwise, the offense was what we thought it was going to be in preseason camp and then after that Georgia game.
You bring up health. I think that's the biggest thing with this extended playoff. I'm not saying Notre Dame would have beaten Ohio State, but they basically didn't have a running back, and Riley Leonard after the first series looked like he was going to die. So, I mean, obviously health was an issue. I'm going to bring this full circle here, Roy. And we know you're a very busy man. You got to, go handle things. We were talking about college football changing and all of that, and some coaches getting out, right, Mac? We've seen a lot of different coaches say, I'm done, specifically in college basketball too, just being like, I'm out. Dabo Swinney is 55 years old. This is a July topic. I think people forget Dabo is 55. Like, that's not that old.
No.
Do you feel like Dabo's almost been reinvigorated a little bit, going to the portal? It feels like he's kind of good with where college football is right now, and it feels like he could coach another 20 years. Like, what's your feeling on that?
All right, so that's an interesting conversation, too, because I'll just be honest. You guys remember I called the Clemson, South Carolina game.
You did a phenomenal job, Roy. It was great.
He was a homer. He was a chicken.
No,
that was unbelievable.
But I remind you of that to remind myself a little bit of what the meetings were like that week. Mm. And, we obviously met with Shane Beamer pregame, and we did that over Zoom. But we met with Clemson in person, which is typically what you do at ESPN. The home team, you're there in person usually a day or two beforehand. The visiting team, you have to do via Zoom. And so we met with Coach Beamer and his staff first that week, and then we met with Dabo in person later on. And we're in his office and we're talking, and look, Coach, he couldn't be more happy for me and my success as a broadcaster, and particularly that week. He knew it was a big deal for me as somebody that grew up in the state. But sitting in his office, it was different. It was different than what I remembered doing pregame interviews with him a decade before. It was different than what I remembered calling the Clemson Wake Forest game, which Wake Forest could have won the Atlantic Division Championship just 3 years prior. I don't want to say the joy was gone, because he's the most joyous person I've ever been around and the highest energy level person I've ever been around. But it was different. And truthfully, we, kind of started that week, and after talking to both staffs, we just kind of thought, well, I'd probably give a little bit of an edge to South Carolina here. They just had a little bit more juice in that moment, as weird as that is to say. And I just wondered at the time, I'm like, I wonder, like, is Coach Swaney, is this something he's going to be doing 5 or 10 years from now? I never, ever would have thought I would have said it. It wasn't that the joy was gone, but I think that there's a lot of criticism last year in various moments. You're not in a portal. As the game passed Clemson by, all that narrative was still out there.
Sure.
And even after the South Carolina game, that was out there, and people were banging that drum. And I kind of questioned it for a moment too. And then all of a sudden they win the ACC championship. Hoosier buries the 56-yard field goal. They're in the playoff. They're at Texas, and you can kind of see the spark come back quickly. And then they kind of dabbled in the portal a little bit, and just things started to change. And then Klubnik kind of did his thing a little bit more after that, and I think he's back in it, man. I think whatever was happening for about a year or two, and just off my own personal observations, and he may just completely blow all that out of the water. I mean, he does those things often, you guys know. It's a different Dabo now than what it was at the end of last year. And you can hear that in his tone, in his body language, in every box that you could potentially check for a head coach. And I think if you're a Clemson fan, you'd love that. And I think you see that. Like, I don't think what I'm saying is something that was lost on the fan base or even you guys. And you tell me where I'm wrong, but I think for a year or two, you just kind of looked and wondered. We all questioned, should he be doing more of this and less of that? Should he make this hire at this coaching position? And what happened here? I think we're finding out the answer now. It took a moment. You bring in Tom Allen. It took a moment. You dip your toe into the portal. You're not all the way in there, but you brought in some dudes that are going to help you, and yet you still now have this pride on your culture and not having just transformed your roster 18 times over in the last 3 years. And it looks like you're one of the favorites again to compete for a national championship. That's a long-winded answer, and I understand that. But, I think he's reinvigorated. I think he's re-energized. And I don't know if it's just the things that I just talked about there. I think that's part of it. And maybe there's other parts that we need to know. We're not even privy to. But the Dabo I hear now and I see now reminds me of the Dabo that we used to talk to back at the station in 2016. You do the math on what that equates to.
Yeah, scary for everybody else. It's going to be a fun ride, specifically for the Tigers, but just in college football, man. It feels like some things are balancing out. Feels like talent is being spread out. We're figuring this whole playoff thing out. We get great games, great matchups. It's going to be a lot of fun, and we can't wait to watch you all fall long, brother. So thanks for your time. This was exceptional as always. It's always great to see you, and just let the beard hang, man. I'm a little behind, but just let it go.
We're working on it. It's a work in progress. Maybe next time we'll darken it up a little bit more.
Oh, it's wisdom. Wisdom.
A little bit of wisdom, and the light makes it look grayer than what it does in real time. There's more gray this year than there was this time last year.
Well,
but it's great
as
to
long
be
as
with
we're
you
still
guys.
a little on top, you're going to be in a good spot.
Yeah. We're good there, but it's great to be with you guys.